Her quiet farm life turns into a terrifying battle for survival when a brutal cartel comes knocking. But when her prosecutor's son unexpectedly arrives, is he her savior, or does his hidden fight against their world put them both in even greater danger? The sun was high and hot, beating down on the dry, cracked earth of my fields. The corn was struggling this year, like everything else. It was just me in this land, like it had been for a long time. The only sounds were the buzz of flies, the distant lowing of my 2 cows, and the creak of my old windmill turning slowly in the breeze. It was peaceful, a hard peace earned over many years of sweat and worry, but mine. That peace shattered like dropped glass the day the black truck showed up. It wasn't a farm truck. It was too clean, too shiny black, rumbling down my long, dusty road where only dirt roads belong. It stopped by the gate, and 2 men got out. They wore dark clothes, even under the hot sun, and they looked around like they owned the place already. Strangers out here usually wave, maybe nod. These men just stared. My heart started to beat a frantic drum against my ribs. Something felt very, very wrong. I walked slowly towards the gate, wiping my hands on my worn jeans. My hands were shaking a little, which made me angry at myself. I'm a tough old bird, I told myself, but these men felt different. They didn't smile. They didn't offer a friendly greeting. They just stood there, blocking the entrance to my home. One of them, the bigger one, stepped forward. He didn't have to speak loudly. His voice was low but carried a weight that pressed down on me. He talked about my farm, about the crops I was trying to grow. He knew details he shouldn't have known, like how much land I'd planted, even about my cows. It felt like they'd been watching me. That thought sent a shiver down my spine, even in the heat. Then he got to the point. They wanted a piece of my harvest. Not asking, demanding. A percentage, a big chunk, to be paid every time I brought anything in. He said it was for protection. Protection from what? I wanted to yell. Protection from them? The nerve of it made my blood boil, but the coldness in his eyes froze the words in my throat. He explained it like it was just a simple business deal, but his words felt like threats wrapped in smooth paper. He said if I paid, things would be easy. He didn't say what would happen if I didn't pay, but the way the other man leaned against the truck, watching me with an unblinking stare, told me everything I needed to know. My mind raced. How could I give them anything? I barely made enough to keep the farm going, to keep food on my table. Giving them a big piece would mean losing everything I'd worked my whole life for. I tried to argue, to say I didn't have much, that I was just a single woman running a small farm. The bigger man cut me off, his voice still low but now sharp like broken glass. He said my situation was my problem, not theirs. He said they would be back next week to collect the first payment. He gave me a date, a deadline that felt impossible. My head swam. It was happening too fast, this nightmare unfolding right in front of my eyes. The smaller man finally spoke, his voice quiet but carrying a different kind of chill. He pointed a finger, not quite at me, but towards the old swing hanging from the big oak tree by the house. It was the swing where my boy, David, used to play when he was little. A lump formed in my throat. He said it would be a shame if accidents started happening around the farm. Maybe even if things or people I cared about. His eyes flicked towards the house for just a second. That look, that quiet sentence was like a punch to the gut. It wasn't just about money or crops anymore. They were threatening my home, my memories, maybe even, well, he didn't say who he meant by people, but out here, it could only mean me. They had crossed a line from being scary, demanding strangers to something truly evil. The sun suddenly felt less hot, the air thinner. Fear, real, paralyzing fear, started to set in deep in my bones. The bigger man gave a short, humorless laugh. Next week, he repeated his voice final. They got back in a black truck. It didn't kick up as much dust leaving as it should have. It just seemed to glide away, leaving a heavy, suffocating silence behind. I stood by the gate for a long time, watching the spot where the truck had disappeared down the road. My farm, my peaceful, hard-won life felt tainted. The shadows seemed longer, the quiet no longer peaceful, but empty and watchful. The threat hung in the air, heavy and unseen, and I didn't know how I would ever breathe right again. I didn't sleep that night. Every creak of the old house, Every rustle of leaves outside the window sounded like their truck coming back. I sat in the dark, the silence of the farm that used to comfort me now amplifying my fear. When the sun finally came up, weak and pale, I felt like I hadn't rested in a year. The thought of them coming back next week gnawed at me like a rat in the pantry. What could I do? I had no money to give them and no way to fight them. My hands trembled as I tried to do my chores. Milking the cows, feeding the chickens, the simple things that made up my day felt heavy and meaningless now. Every time I looked down the road, I expected to see that black truck. My heart leaped into my throat at the sound of any engine, even a neighbor's far-off tractor. The feeling of being watched was constant. I'd look up from weeding and have the sudden, chilling certainty that somewhere out there, someone was looking back. That wasn't the worst part. They didn't wait a week. Just 2 days later, I woke up to find my barn door kicked in. The old wood was splintered, hanging crookedly on its hinges. Nothing inside was taken. Nothing was even touched. But the message was loud and clear. They could get to me anytime, anywhere on my property. They weren't just making threats anymore. They were showing me their power, showing me how easily they could break into my life. I spent the morning trying to fix the door, the wood groaning in protest as I hammered nails that didn't quite fit the broken frame. Each hammer blow felt like hitting my own frustration and fear. While I was working, a car slowed down on the main road, not even turning onto my lane. It was just a regular car, gray, nothing special. But it slowed right down as it passed, and I saw heads turn towards the farm. Then it sped up again. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was them. I couldn't tell anymore. Everyone felt like a potential threat. Every vehicle a possible danger. The next day, something else happened. I went out to check the fence line down by the creek, where I hadn't been in a while. I found a section of my barbed wire fence cut clean through. Not broken, but cut with heavy-duty cutters. There were fresh footprints in the soft earth nearby. Big boot prints that weren't mine, weren't a neighbor's. They had been on my land again, walking where they pleased, cutting my fence just to show they could. It was like they were marking their territory, letting me know I wasn't safe anywhere on my own farm anymore. I fixed the fence as best I could, my hands scratched by the wire, my mind racing. They were playing with me, little tests, little pokes to see how I'd react, to keep me scared. And it was working. I jumped at shadows. I started locking doors that I hadn't locked in years. The friendly bark of my dog, Buster, no longer felt like a greeting, but a warning. Even the taste of my food felt different, flat, and tasteless because of the constant knot in my stomach. The day they were supposed to come back for the first payment arrived like a storm cloud on the horizon. I spent the morning pacing, watching the road, my heart doing that frantic beat again. I didn't have the money. What would they do? Would they just take my cows? Burn my barn down? The man's threat about people I cared about echoed in my ears, even though David was far away. Could they reach him? The thought was like a cold wave washing over me. Around lunchtime, the black truck finally appeared. It drove slower this time, deliberately. It pulled right up to the house, closer than before. 3 men got out this time, not 2. The big one who had spoken before was there, and the quiet one with the cold eyes. The third man was smaller, wiry, with a cruel smile that didn't reach his eyes. They walked right up to my porch steps, not waiting for me to come out. "We're here," the big one said, his voice flat. Time to pay. My mouth was dry. I wanted to speak, to tell them I had nothing, but the words wouldn't come out. The wiry one scanned the porch, his eyes lingering on a picture frame I had there, a picture of David graduating from college, smiling, looking so proud. His cruel smile widened just a little bit. Then the big one spoke again, his voice dropping to a low growl that made my blood run cold. "We don't like waiting, and we always get what we want, one way or another." He took a step closer to the porch, and I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that this was no longer just about money. This was about control, about power, and they were about to take it, starting right here, right now on my own porch. They finally left. The black truck roared away, leaving me standing on the porch, shaking like a leaf in a storm. The air where they had been felt thick and wrong. Their words, especially the last ones, circled in my head like buzzing flies. One way or another. It didn't feel like they meant just taking things anymore. It felt like they meant hurting me. I stumbled inside the house, locking the door behind me, even though I knew a lock wouldn't stop men like that. The quiet inside the house was different now. It wasn't the peaceful quiet I was used to. It was the quiet of waiting, of listening, of being afraid. I walked through the rooms, touching familiar things. The worn arm of my favorite chair, the cool wood of the kitchen table, the pictures on the wall. Each one felt precious and suddenly fragile, like they could be taken from me at any moment. My gaze stopped on the picture of David. He was smiling that big, bright smile, wearing his cap and gown. He looked so full of hope, so ready to face the world. Seeing his face brought a fresh wave of pain and worry. He was so far away, living his life. What would he possibly do about this? He worked with laws and papers, not with men who kicked down doors and cut fences. It felt wrong to bring him into this darkness. It felt like I would be pulling him back into the struggles I'd always tried to shield him from. But who else was there? The police out here were few and far between, and everyone knew these men had eyes and ears everywhere. Calling the local sheriff felt like putting a target on my back without any real protection. I sat down by the phone, my hand hovering over it. My heart was pounding again. It had been a while since we talked. Just quick calls. How are you, Mom? Everything's fine, David. I hadn't wanted to burden him with the everyday worries of the farm, let alone something like this. But looking at the kicked-in door, feeling the fear gripping me, I knew I couldn't handle this alone. I was out of ideas, out of strength. Maybe he would just know what to do. He was smart, always had been. Picking up the receiver felt like lifting a stone. It was heavy with all my fear and all my hope. I slowly dialed his number, the sound loud in the silent house. Each ring felt like an hour. What if he didn't answer? What if he was busy? What if he didn't believe me? The possibilities twisted in my stomach. Just as I was about to hang up, defeated, I heard a click and then his voice. "Hello," he said. His voice was different from the boy I remembered. Deeper, more serious. Hearing it brought tears to my eyes, a mix of relief and the dam of fear finally breaking a little. I tried to speak, but only a shaky breath came out. "Mom, are you okay?" His voice sharpened. He sounded worried. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "David," I whispered. It's Mom." I started to tell him, the words tumbling out in a rush, messy and scared. About the men, the black truck, the demands, the broken door, the cut fence, the look in their eyes. I tried to explain the fear, how it felt like they were everywhere. I heard him listening quietly at first, then asking questions. His questions weren't like a son asking his mother about her day. They were sharp, clear, like he was trying to understand a problem, piece by piece. He asked about the men's faces, their clothes, exactly what they said. He even asked about the black truck. As I spoke, some of the fear started to ease just a little. Talking about it out loud made it feel slightly less overwhelming, and hearing his calm, steady voice on the other end was a comfort I hadn't realized I needed so badly. He didn't interrupt. He just listened, letting me get it all out. When I finished, there was a moment of silence. I held my breath, waiting. What would he say? Would he tell me to call the local police? Would he say there was nothing he could do? Then he spoke, and his voice had a hard edge I'd never heard before. "Mom," he said, "listen to me. I'm coming home." My breath hitched. "David, no, it's too dangerous." I started to protest, the fear for him instantly overriding my own relief. "No," he cut in, his voice firm. "I'm coming. I can handle this." He didn't explain how he could handle it, or what he meant. He just said he would be here as fast as he could. He told me to stay inside, to be careful, to not talk to anyone about this. His voice was so sure, so strong, that despite the fresh wave of worry his decision brought, a small seed of hope began to sprout in the barren ground of my fear. He was coming. My boy was coming home to protect me. The hours stretched out like endless miles of empty road. After the call with David, the waiting began. Every minute felt slower than the last. I still jumped at every sound, still scanned the road until my eyes ached, but now the fear was mixed with a new kind of anxiety, worry for David. What if they were watching the roads? What if they knew he was coming? How could one person, even my smart, strong son, stand up to men like that? The day crawled by. The black truck didn't show up again right away, which should have been a relief, but it wasn't. Their absence felt more threatening than their presence. It felt like they were just waiting, or maybe doing something else. I found myself walking over to the barn again, looking at the splintered door, then going down by the creek to check the cut fence, even though I knew it was foolish. It was like I needed to see the evidence of what was happening to believe it wasn't just a terrible dream. The damaged farm felt like a reflection of my own broken peace. The next morning brought a new kind of scare. I stepped outside to get the eggs, and something on the porch railing caught my eye. It was a small, dark object tied on with a piece of string. My heart leaped into my throat. It wasn't a bomb or anything that looked obviously dangerous, but it was unsettling. It was a small, carved wooden skull. It looked rough, handmade, not threatening in itself, maybe, but placed there after everything else. It felt like a message, a silent, chilling warning left right on my doorstep. They were still here. They were still watching. I knocked the skull off the railing with a stick, not wanting to touch it. It fell into the dirt. I stood there for a long moment, the small piece of wood feeling heavier than stone. They weren't just demanding money. They were in my head, playing games, trying to make me feel like I had nowhere safe to stand. It worked. My home felt invaded, not just by the damage, but by their sinister presence that seemed to linger in the air like smoke. The rest of that day was a blur of watching and waiting. I tried to clean, to keep busy, but my eyes kept drifting to the window, to the road. I thought about David driving, wondered where he was, worried if he was okay. I imagined him arriving, imagined facing those men with him by my side. Would he be scared? Would he know what to do when their cold eyes were fixed on him? He was used to courtrooms, not dusty farms and dangerous men. Late in the afternoon, just as the sun was starting to dip low, painting long shadows across the fields, I heard it. Not the loud roar of the black truck, but a different sound. A car. A sleek car like the one I'd seen drive slowly by a few days ago, only this time it was turning onto my road. My heart jumped, then started to race. It was black, just like their truck, but shaped differently, more formal. It drove up toward the house, slow and steady. It wasn't a black truck, and as it got closer, I saw that it wasn't just any car. It looked like one of those important cars, the kind government people drive. It stopped near the porch, and the driver's side door opened. And then I saw him. David. He was wearing a dark suit, crisp and clean, so different from the jeans and t-shirts he wore when he was growing up here. He looked taller, broader, his face set in a serious expression. He got out of the car and stood there for a moment, looking at me on the porch, looking at the house, at the farm. His eyes, the same kind eyes I remembered, seemed to take everything in at once. Then he walked towards me. Fast now. He didn't say anything at first. He just reached me on the porch steps and pulled me into a hug, a strong, tight hug that lifted me off my feet for a second. It felt like coming home myself, just being held by him. When he finally let go, he held me at arm's length, looking at my face. The serious look was still there, but there was something else too, a deep concern. "Mom," he said, his voice low. He looked past me at the kicked-in barn door. "They did this." I nodded, my voice thick with emotion. "And the fence," I managed to say, "and they left this." I pointed towards where I had knocked the wooden skull. David walked over, looked at it lying in the dirt, his jaw tightening. He didn't touch it either. He turned back to me, his eyes scanning the property again, then looking back at the road. He seemed to be calculating, thinking quickly. "Tell me everything again," he said, his voice calm but urgent. "From the beginning. Every detail." We went inside, and I told him the whole story again, everything I'd told him on the phone, and everything that had happened since. He listened, his gaze fixed on me, asking those sharp, focused questions again. As I talked, I saw something shift in his eyes. The worry was still there, but something else was growing, a cold determination that sent a shiver, this time not of fear, but of something else, something powerful. He wasn't just my son anymore. He was something more, and I had a feeling that his coming home was about to change everything. After I finished telling David everything, he didn't say much for a long moment. He just sat there on the old couch, looking towards the door, his eyes serious. It was quiet except for the ticking clock on the wall, which suddenly sounded very loud. My fear felt like a heavy stone in my chest, but seeing him there, so calm and focused, made the edges of it feel a little softer. He wasn't angry, not in a loud way, but there was a tightness around his mouth that told me he was taking this very seriously. Then he moved. He took out his phone, a different kind of phone than mine, maybe. It had lots of buttons. He looked at it for a second, then walked toward the window, turning his back slightly towards me. He spoke in a low voice, too low for me to hear exactly what he was saying. He used words I didn't understand, not big words, but maybe important words like talking in code. He kept his voice quiet, almost a whisper, looking out at the fields, then towards the road. It sounded like he was talking to someone important, giving directions, maybe, or asking for something. He made 2 more calls, each one short and quiet. While he was talking, I watched him. He wasn't the boy who used to run barefoot through these fields, skinning his knees. He was a man now, standing tall, wearing that serious suit. He looked like he belonged in a different world, a world I only saw on the news. But here he was in my little farmhouse, dealing with the same dirt and danger I faced every day. It was strange seeing those 2 worlds touch. When he finished the calls, he turned back to me. He didn't smile, but his eyes were kind. "Okay, Mom," he said. "This is what's going to happen." He spoke slowly, making sure I understood. He said he had called some people who could help. He didn't say who exactly, just that they were people who knew how to handle this kind of problem. He said they would be coming, but not right away. They needed to be careful, to do things the right way. He explained that sometimes to catch bad people, you have to wait for the right moment. He said the men who had been here were part of a bigger group, and that he knew about this group. Not just from what I told him, but he knew about them already. That surprised me. How could he know about the men bullying a small farmer like me, all the way from the city? He didn't explain that part fully, just that he had been working on things related to them. It was confusing, but the way he said it, so calm and sure, made me feel a little safer. He had a plan. My son, the one who used to bring me muddy wildflowers, had a plan to deal with dangerous men. He told me what I needed to do. Stay inside as much as possible. Don't open the door for anyone I didn't know. If the men came back before the help arrived, I shouldn't talk to them, shouldn't let them in. Just tell them David was here and he was handling things. That last part made my stomach clench. Telling those men that David was here felt like putting him in even more danger. He was facing them for me. The thought was both incredibly moving and absolutely terrifying. "David," I started, my voice shaking. "Be careful. Please. These men, they're not good." He walked over to me and took my hands. They were rough from years of work, but his felt smooth, strong. "I know, Mom," he said, his eyes locking onto mine. "That's why I'm here. I know what I'm doing. I've been working on things like this for a while." Again, that hint of something bigger, something I didn't understand, but his confidence was like a steady hand holding mine. We spent the rest of the day quietly. David didn't just sit around. He walked around the farm, not like he was sightseeing, but like he was studying it. He looked at the angles of the house, the barn, the road. He looked at places where someone could hide. He wasn't wearing a suit anymore, but jeans and a simple shirt, yet he still moved with that serious purpose. He seemed to be calculating, preparing. I watched him from the window, a mix of pride in the man he had become and a mother's deep, aching fear for the danger he was walking into, right here on my land. He was setting something in motion, and I had a feeling the quiet peace of the farm was about to be broken in a way it might never recover from. The next day was long and tense. David was up before me. I found him standing outside by the barn, looking towards the road, the air cool and fresh around him. He wasn't doing anything, just watching, listening. It felt like the whole farm was holding its breath, waiting. We ate breakfast quietly. Every time a car passed on the main road, just a faraway sound, my heart would leap. David stayed calm, but his eyes were constantly alert. He told me to stay inside, to stay away from the windows. Around mid-morning, the sound I had been dreading filled the air. The low rumble of a heavy truck turning onto my road. The black truck, my breath caught in my throat. I looked at David. He didn't look scared. He looked ready. He stood up straight, his jaw set. "Stay here, Mom," he said, his voice firm but quiet. He walked toward the front door, not rushing, just moving with a steady purpose. I couldn't stay back. I went to the living room window, peering through a gap in the curtains. The black truck pulled up, stopping right by the gate, just like the first time. This time, 4 men got out. More of them. My stomach twisted. They walked towards the house, not bothering to knock on the gate, just opening it and walking through like they owned the place. They looked confident, expecting to find just me, scared and ready to hand over money. But David was standing on the porch, waiting for them. He didn't look big or tough like them, but he stood there, tall and still, wearing the dark suit again. He didn't move as they approached, just watched them. They stopped a few feet from the porch steps, looking surprised to see him. The biggest man, the one who usually did the talking, scowled. "Who are you?" he growled, his voice loud and rough this time. David didn't answer right away. He just looked at them, his gaze steady. The other men shifted uncomfortably, their eyes darting between David and the house. The tension in the air was so thick I could almost see it shimmering. Then David spoke. His voice was calm, clear, and it carried across the yard. "My name is David Rodriguez," he said. He paused for just a second, and in that second, I felt a strange jolt. "Rodriguez. My last name. Of course." But the way he said it, it sounded different, important. Then he added something else, words that made the men standing there freeze. "And I'm the Assistant United States Attorney assigned to the task force investigating your organization." He didn't shout it. He just stated it, plain and simple. But the words hit the men like a physical blow. Their eyes widened, their confident smiles vanished. They looked at each other, then back at David, their faces a mixture of shock and disbelief. The big man's jaw dropped slightly. My own breath hitched. Assistant United States Attorney? Task Force? Investigating their organization? My son? The boy who used to chase fireflies? I had thought he was just a lawyer, maybe a regular prosecutor. I had no idea he worked on things like this, things big enough to involve men like these. It was like looking at him, my own son, and seeing a complete stranger, someone with a hidden life, a dangerous life. The wiry man with the cruel smile was the first to recover. He sneered, trying to play it off. "Never heard of you. You're bluffing, kid." But his voice lacked its earlier confidence. David didn't react to the insult. He just reached into his suit jacket and pulled out a small badge holder, flipping it open to show them. It glinted in the sunlight. He didn't say anything, just let them see it. That did it. The big man paled visibly. The men started to look around frantically, their eyes scanning past the house, towards the edges of the property. They knew what a federal task force meant. They knew that badge wasn't something you just had. They had walked onto a farm to bully an old woman, and instead, they had walked straight into a trap set by someone who wasn't just a prosecutor, but the very person who was hunting them. Just as the realization fully hit their faces, a different sound filled the air, the distinct wail of sirens, growing louder by the second, coming fast down my road from both directions. The trap had sprung. Suddenly, the quiet afternoon was ripped apart by sound. The wail of sirens, loud and piercing, filled the air, coming closer so fast it felt like the world was rushing in. I flattened myself against the wall by the window, peering out again. From both directions down my dusty road, official-looking cars, not black trucks, but cars with flashing blue and red lights on top, appeared. They skidded to a stop near my gate, and doors flew open. Men and women in vests with words I couldn't read quickly spilled out. They weren't wearing dark clothes like the cartel men. They wore clothes that looked like uniforms, or like people who were serious about their jobs. Out on the yard, the 4 cartel men who had just been standing there looking tough were now looking completely lost and scared. Their faces, just moments ago, full of shock from what David had said, now showed pure panic. They looked around frantically, like cornered animals, not knowing where to run. David stood his ground on the porch, watching them, his face still serious, not moving. He wasn't scared anymore. He looked in control. The people from the cars moved fast, yelling things I couldn't hear through the glass, but their voices were sharp and commanding. The cartel men didn't put up a fight. They looked surprised, outnumbered, and maybe knew they were caught dead to rights after David's words and badge. They put their hands up, slowly, their tough looks gone. It happened so fast, the change from them being in charge to them being captured. One moment, they were a terrifying threat on my porch. The next, they were being roughly turned around and having their hands secure behind their backs with shiny metal handcuffs. I watched from the window, my hands pressed against the glass, my heart still hammering, but now with a strange mix of fear and a building wave of something else. Relief, maybe, and a stunned wonder at what was happening. My son, my David, had somehow brought this here. He hadn't just called the local police. He had brought people who clearly knew what they were doing, people who weren't afraid. They moved with purpose, surrounding the cartel men, making sure they couldn't go anywhere. One of the people in a vest walked over to David on the porch. They spoke for a few seconds, the vested person nodding, looking towards the captured men. It was clear David was in charge of this part, that these people were here because of him. He wasn't just the son of the farmer. He was the reason this was happening. It was like watching a movie, but it was real, unfolding right outside my window on my farm. The dust settled slightly, but the air was still thick with the energy of what had just happened. They started putting the cartel men into the back of the cars. I saw the big man, the one who had first come to my gate, his face pale and angry as he was pushed into the back seat. The wiry one with the cruel smile tried to say something, but a person in a vest just told him to get in, firmly. Seeing their faces, seeing them defeated and taken away, was a powerful feeling. The fear that had lived inside me for so long started to loosen its grip just a little bit. More official cars arrived, pulling up and parking neatly on the road. People got out with notepads and cameras, looking around the farm, taking pictures of the damaged barn door, the cut fence. They were gathering proof, building their case. David stepped off the porch and walked over to where they were, talking to them, pointing things out. He looked completely at ease, like this was just another day's work for him. The sirens faded into the distance as the cars with the captured men drove away. But the farm was still far from quiet. Uniformed people were everywhere, walking the fields, talking in low voices. It was strange seeing so many strangers on my land, but these strangers felt safe. They were here to help, to clean up the mess the other strangers had made. I stayed by the window, watching them, watching David move among them, talking, explaining. He seemed older, stronger, more capable than I had ever imagined. The immediate danger felt gone, hauled away in the back of those cars, but the reality of what had happened, and who my son truly was just starting to sink in. Slowly, the commotion began to die down. The people in vests and uniforms finished their work. They took down crime scene tape, packed up their cameras, and the official cars started to leave, one by one, heading back down my road until the farm was quiet again, but a different kind of quiet than before. It was the quiet after a storm, calm, but with the memory of the thunder still in the air. Only a few cars remained, and a couple of people were still finishing up near the gate. David finally walked back toward the house. He looked tired now, the intense focus on his face softening as he approached. He climbed the porch steps, and this time, when he reached me, he just pulled me into another hug, a long, warm embrace. I held on to him tightly, burying my face in his suit jacket. The fear was mostly gone now, replaced by an overwhelming feeling of relief and love for this man, my son, who had faced down the darkness for me. When he let go, he looked at me with those kind eyes I knew so well. "Are you okay, Mom?" he asked softly. I nodded, tears welling up again, but these were different tears, not from fear, but from gratitude and the sheer relief that it was over, at least for now. "Yes, David," I managed to whisper. "I am now, because of you." He gently brushed some dust off my shoulder. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you before," he said, his voice low. "About my job, about all of it." He looked out towards the fields where the cartel men had stood just a little while ago. "I work on cases like this, Mom. Cases against these kinds of groups. It's dangerous work. I couldn't tell you the details for your safety. And because, well, you raised me to be honest and good. This world I work in, it's not always like that." I looked at him, at the man he had become. The boy who left this farm had gone out into the world and faced its worst parts, not by running away, but by standing against them. He fought not with his fists, but with laws and truth and courage I hadn't known he possessed. It was hard to take in this hidden life he led. It was a dangerous life, I knew that now more than ever, but it was also a life of purpose, of fighting for what was right. He was using his strength and his mind to protect people, just like he had protected me. We stood there for a while longer, just looking out at the farm. The damaged barn door was still there, the cut fence down by the creek. The physical scars of what had happened remained, a reminder of the fear and the fight. But now they felt different. They felt like proof that we had faced something terrible and survived it together. David's job meant he would have to go back to his other life, his dangerous life. I knew that. The fear for him wouldn't completely go away. But looking at my farm, at the setting sun painting the sky in soft colors, and looking at my son standing strong beside me, I felt a deep sense of peace I hadn't felt in a long time. He had come home, faced down the bullies, and shown me that even when you feel weakest, you have strength you didn't know was there, especially when the people you love stand with you. This farm was still my life, and now it felt like my life and my son's were tied together in a way that no cartel, no matter how tough, could ever truly break.